Hey everyone, you are listening to the DMZ America Podcast for Thursday, January 11th, 2024. Coming to you from the left, I am editorial cartoonist Ted Rall.
And I am editorial cartoonist Scott Stantis, coming to you from the right.
And so, Scott, today we're going to get it. We're going to have, as usual, three topics. We're going to talk about Israel's war against Hamas in Gaza, and I guess we should also talk about the regional repercussions in the West Bank, the Red Sea, Lebanon, and so on. Also, we're going to be talking about this kind of crazy Georgia DA turn of events, let's just say, involving Fani Willis, and
yeah, let's call it that.
And then lastly, what do we say we're talking about third?
14th Amendment.
The U.S. Supreme Court.
Everybody's talking about it.
Everyone is talking about it, and it's a big deal. The Huge Colorado deal. Supreme Court and the Maine Secretary of State have both have both decided to dump Trump from the primary as well as the general election ballot on the grounds that he's an insurrectionist. Supreme Court has agreed to hear the case, so we'll get into that last. Okay, so let's talk about Israel and Gaza. So currently, there's, according to the Gaza Health Ministry, 23,200 people Gazans are now dead in the Gaza Strip. That is a benchmark because that's 1% of the pre-war population. To put that into context, that's been about 3 months, and now far more people have died in Gaza than have died in the Russia-Ukraine war in over 2 years, or almost 2 years, and in a much bigger conflict zone. In Ukraine, there's 20 or 30,000 square miles of conflict zone. There's only 140 square miles in Gaza total, and it's not even all. So it's pretty high intensity war. The Republic of South Africa has filed charges in the International Court of Justice in the Hague, charging Israel with genocide. Most analysts believe there is a chance that Israel will be found guilty of genocide in that court, something that's never happened to any country before since 1948, since the Convention Against Genocide was passed.
Well, there hasn't been genocide in the world since then.
There certainly have been, but it's very hard to prove. Yeah, there's Rwanda. There's there was of course Kosovo. There's been others.
I was being facetious.
Yeah. Oh, the Rohingya, right? The Rohingya in Myanmar. So the Israelis are taking it very seriously. They're sending their top legal minds. There's been the Houthis, the Yemeni Houthis have been bombing and droning shipping in the Red Sea on the way to the Suez Canal, which has impacted global energy prices and supply chains already. The US is trying to figure out how to hit the Houthis and figure out what to do about it. Meanwhile, Iran has seized an American flagged oil tanker as of earlier today. I'm sure you'll remember the Mayaguez.
Oh, yes.
It has shades of that. And
let's stop real quick and just tell the kids in the audience who have no idea what we're talking about.
So the Mayaguez USS. Go ahead, Scott. You tell the story.
The USS Mayaguez was a U.S. destroyer, if I'm not mistaken.
That's
and
correct.
It was cruising off the coast of Vietnam. And, now here's where I'm getting a little confused. Who actually...
It was the Khmer Rouge.
That's what Cambodia. I thought. Now, does Cambodia have access to the sea?
It does. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think where. I'm going through the geography in my head.
Between it has a southern coastline between Vietnam and Thailand. So if you follow the Thai coastland, the Thai coast east, you run into the city of Trat, and then you cross the border, and you're now in Cambodia.
Anyway, so they captured the ship, said it was in Cambodian waters. They took the ship a prize. They took the crew as hostages. Mm-hmm. And one of the few times America could say this, they launched a commando raid to free the hostages, and did.
And it worked. and nobody
Yeah.
died.
I'm not sure if any Cambodians were. Is that true?
There might have been some Khmer Rouge who died, but it's like it wasn't a bloodbath by any standard, and all the Americans were
And then they released the
returned
ship.
safely.
And the reason I remember this is that the steering wheel, or whatever the hell it's called in nautical terms, the steering wheel was, this was all under President Ford. Is it?
I think so. Or maybe not.
Anyway.
Well, there's the wheel, right?
Yeah, the anyway.
Yeah.
So anyway, they got it and they presented it to President Ford, who had it in the Oval Office.
Oh, it's kind of cool.
Yeah,
but it's like,
when you're in office for less than like a week, you clumb onto whatever fame you can.
Now, what I've noticed, so what's interesting to me, there's a bunch of things that are interesting.
God, there's a lot of moving parts here. It's scary.
There's a lot. So maybe we should start with the threat of regional spread, because I mean, look, I don't think the U.S. is going to want to open a war with Iran. I don't think they ever want to. Iran's a real country. There have been disputes in the past where shipping has been intercepted by the Iranian Republican guards and then released later on. I would suspect that something like that will happen here. The Iranians will not keep it. They'll want something in return, maybe they'll get it, maybe they won't. But I mean, I think both sides do not want a U.S.-Iran war. Okay, so then there's now I do think.
Can I throw in one little spin too, because there's layer upon layer upon layer on this stuff. But the Iranians realize that it's an election year, right? And no one lost votes in the United States by bombing anybody.
No, that's true. That is true.
Just saying.
However, bombing Iran would be problematic, but because I could see them deciding like, okay, well, now we're going to put on our big boy pants and we're going to bomb Israel and make ourselves giant heroes to the entire world. To the entire Muslim world. I mean, the Muslim world is completely inflamed right now, and Iran's always. I don't
think they are, and I don't agree with you on that, Ted. I really can't. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I don't see that. I mean, what are you basing this on, other than maybe some rhetoric? But they're not the ones who brought suit against Israel in the Hague. They're not. They're not doing anything that I can see.
Because there's a huge separation between the regimes like the royal family of Saudi Arabia and the Arab street, right? I mean, I think the regimes like the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan don't give two shits about the Palestinians, but the streets do. There are massive protests going on in Arab capitals, and there's sustained pressure to the point where, like, for example, the Saudis, the Jordanians, even the Turks have had to. Turkey used to be a close ally of Israel. They've recalled their ambassadors. They're threatening to close down to sever diplomatic relations. The President Erdogan of Turkey compared Netanyahu to Hitler. This is, I mean, it's definitely the Arab world is. I mean, the street is inflamed, and even these dictatorships cannot ignore what has happened here. I mean, I think.
Yeah, I don't see it, but go on. I mean, I haven't seen it. Think that doesn't mean it's not happening.
I mean, you're also seeing public support for Israel just internationally is evaporating. I mean, there's President Macron of France is really disgusted. He's
French. When isn't he?
Okay, fine. But the point is, France is definitely usually on Team Israel. I don't know. I guess we can just cut straight to the chase, Scott. I think Israel has gone too far by a lot. The UN has already declared what is officially declared what Israel is engaged in to be an act of ethnic cleansing. That's clearly what it is, right? They have flattened a territory, the territory of Gaza, with the goal of making it uninhabitable, so that the population is forced to flee. That is what's going to happen. I mean, without a doubt.
Right,
That's
but I
what's
don't
going to
think the
happen.
UN voted to pass. That didn't pass the UN. I believe the
It
United
wasn't a
States
vote.
vetoed it.
No, it was the special rapporteur. I'll find her name, but the UN issued a report already saying that the High Commissioner for Refugees. So, I mean, the point is, it's like it's a really ugly look. And I'm going to ask you a tough question, Scott. I mean, you've
Sure.
always considered yourself a supporter of Israel. Are you still?
Yes,
Why?
absolutely. Why? Because the attacks of October 7th were so brutal, so beyond anything any human being could imagine, that they had to be responded to in an extreme way. Would I have done it this way? Do I think that they've gone too far? Yeah, I do. I think that this is too far. But by turns, I understand the national trauma that they're dealing with and what they had to deal with on these attacks on October 11th. People are forgetting this, and they tend to not mention them. I just, I wake up to NPR in the morning, and just within the last week, they've started to mention the attacks again. Israel didn't just wake up one morning and go, "Oh, let's wipe Gaza off the face of the map." This wasn't born of whole cloth. This was born from a vicious, cruel attack. And you and I have gone round and round on this, and we disagree, and that's fine. But if I was president of the United States, I would still support Israel. I would do what it sounds like the Biden administration is doing, is behind closed doors say, "Okay, guys, what you just said, Ted, you're losing whatever good faith you had in the world." Should this have been handled? I mean, you've suggested this in the past. I think you may have a point. I think 9/11 too. If we had treated it as a police action versus wholesale invasion of first Afghanistan and then God knows why Iraq, the Israelis probably would have been better served had they done it that way. But
yeah, speaking of which, this is a little detour because I do want to get to I really want to stick to the meat of the topic.
Sure.
And I want to follow through on my question. But like, why did the Israelis, I think, started bombing within 48 hours of October 7th? What was the rush? I mean, honestly, the Gazans aren't going anywhere. Hamas isn't going anywhere. They have 240 of your hostages. Why not say, we want all of our hostages back, or there will be trouble? You know what I mean? Like, why not make that, like, why not say, we are going to give you a week or two to think it over, and then we're gonna come down like the wrath of God if you don't do what we say. I mean, like, I think even if like you knew that like Hamas would say fuck you, why would you still not do that so that you could then tell the world, look, we asked nicely?
Yeah, you're talking rationally, and I'm not sure. I would assume you have friends in Israel too. The Israeli friends I've talked to are in shock. They still are. And I think that when you're in shock, I mean, we've talked about this on other issues. I certainly have. When you're angry, when you're in shock, when you're traumatized, worst time in the world to make a decision, an important decision. But they made the decision 2 days, like you said, 48 hours after the attacks. And I recognize and understand why it happened.
But doesn't that make them doesn't it make this government inherently incapable of governing? I mean, to me, it's an incredibly basic requirement for political leadership, is the ability to make emotions, to set your emotions aside and try to make a rational decision when you're under pressure, to be like Spock. I mean, you're not supposed to lash out when you're the prime minister of a country, or for that matter, a secretary of defense of a country. You're supposed to be,
assuming you can find them.
Good point. And like, so like, why not? So, you know what I'm saying? I mean, like, so to me, it's like,
I hear you.
It's sort of saying like, so you're saying yourself as a supporter of Israel, well, here's a government that behaves irrationally and is essentially run by emotionally like immature maniacs. And wait, tell me why we're sending them billions of dollars?
Oh, I don't think it was an error at the time, at the moment. That was the proper response. But you're right.
Why not give it a couple of weeks though? Like I said,
because why give I think the thought would have been
for public
why
consumption.
why give I understand that, but you're talking PR and you're talking about nuance and so on. That's
important when you're a country like Israel that's the largest recipient of foreign aid in the world.
Right, but you're also talking about a situation, an incident that was, where young people were slaughtered, where women were raped so viciously that it cracked their pelvises, that babies were.
There's no evidence of that. Just saying.
Yeah, there's medical. Are you serious? Of course there is.
I mean, like the babies being beheaded and stuff, that turned out to be like, let's just say unsourced, right? Like that was like propaganda.
Right, but you're going to say there weren't murdered babies? I mean, does it really matter? They were murdered?
Of course there were babies that were killed. Yes, they were murdered. That is correct.
I don't think so. This is a country, like you said, it's a very small country. So I have to believe that virtually everybody in that country had some connection to someone who was attacked, killed, raped, whatever. And that's the other thing about this, and this is a side issue, and maybe you can answer this. Women's groups in the United States and elsewhere, totally silent, when clearly the attacks were based partly on raping and belittling and killing and torturing women. I mean, that was one of their main targets.
Well,
where are the women's groups on this? I mean,
look, obviously, I'm not a woman and I'm not a member of a women's group. I can only speculate.
But you know women.
I do know women, and I do know women who are, in leadership roles in organizations like that and top organizations. I imagine, just having been part of political groups, that there is a tremendous desire to remain focused, right? I mean, if you decided to spread, let's just say you're like the national organization for women, and you start like to wade into every time women are raped in war zones. Well, that's the entire world. Every single war has sexual violence is always a part of war. So like, at that rate, you're in 211 countries. I mean, you wouldn't be able to focus on anything here at home. You wouldn't be able to focus on abortion rights and you know what I mean? I think it's too far afield, and they probably figure there are Israeli feminist groups who can do that, and that's for them to take care of.
I think you're giving them a free pass.
They could send out a sternly worded letter to Hamas likely to have any effect?
Well, some kind of condemnation. I'm not hearing any of it. And again, it could be just the experience and the feeds I follow and all that stuff. My point is that it
does feel poorly sourced. And I think that I'll tell you myself, my own reaction was when the baby thing turned out to be bullshit, and that it was spread nevertheless by the president of the United States and the prime minister of Israel. They claimed that they had seen photos which did not exist. They lied. So like the point is, once that happened, the narrative that about additional acts of obscenity, of obscene violence, I think just they lost all credibility. You have one chance to make a good first impression. I think that's really what happened on the left. I think
you're giving far too much credit. I think
does not. I think the left just doesn't believe the Israelis.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's.
And I mean, the Israelis have been lying like crazy. They're talking about today. They're like, there's no food shortage. The IDF said there's no food shortage in Gaza, even while reporters and UN observers say that it's one of the biggest, sites of famine in the world. That 50% of the country, of the territory, is literally starving to death. It's like they just say things, or they say the IDF is the most moral, upstanding army in the world.
Okay, you can't have and it can't be. Those are two very separate notions. It is. Getting back to the women's groups here in the United States, just one more thought here, and then we can move back to the meat of the discussion. And that is that I think they are driven by woke campus, what's happening on campuses, the pro-Palestinian protests that are going on. And I think they're motivated by that. I do not believe that they have any kind of a nuanced thoughts on
but women's groups haven't weighed in even in favor of the Palestinians. They have just
Ted,
not.
In those circles, I'm sorry, I'm talking over you, and I apologize.
No, go ahead.
But I'm just saying, in those circles, you really don't think that there's overlap here?
No, there's overlap.
Come on, of course there is.
There's overlap for sure. Yeah,
And
I
so
mean,
at the dinner parties, they say, "You condemn the attacks? How dare you? Israel is the monster here." And they're going, "Oh, okay, yeah, we're not going to say anything about systemic process of raping women. We're okay with that as long as it's the right flag."
well,
It
so
also, go ahead. I'm sorry.
well, I do. So let's get back to the meat, though. I mean, look, to me, the part that, look, I understand. I don't believe for a minute that we can say that history began on October 7th, 2023, right? Like obviously, the reason that Hamas ever had any support inside the territory, to the extent that look, they didn't get voted in; they seized power illegally, but in a military coup. But obviously, you can't govern even as a dictator without some popular support. Not eventually you'll be overthrown. You need the tacit consent of the governed. So they had that, and to the extent that they did have that, and that their actually the raid on October 7th was like viewed favorably, not only by many people in Gaza and in the West Bank, but also in the Muslim world. It's a reflection on the fact that Israeli policy was very unpopular vis-a-vis the Palestinians, and how they obviously had no interest whatsoever in pursuing peace or a two-state solution or anything. That the settlements were out of control. 700,000 Israeli right-wing, hardcore, extremist colonial settlers in the West Bank, stealing half the territory of the West Bank from property owners who have deeds that go back hundreds of years. Like, I guess my point is that, like, even if we accept that, so the Israelis, Hamas kills 1,200 people, takes 240 hostages, deplorable, disgusting, violent, stipulated. But then what has happened since, which I'm not going to enumerate because anybody who's listening to us knows what happened next. It's kind of like saying, okay, one thing followed the other, but that thing that followed was not justified by what happened first. Like, a reaction was called for, but like what kind of reaction is like the issue here. And I don't think really almost anybody can justify. I don't even think the Israelis really justify what they did since then, because they just brush it off. They don't address it. They don't say, now they had it coming. They deserve to lose 1% of their population, and we're going to keep going. They don't say that. They just say, oh, we just want our hostages back. They ignore the issue completely. Nobody's arguing in favor of what they did. So I guess my point is, it's like, remember when in the 80s, the IRA blew up a hotel in London while trying to kill Maggie Thatcher? They thought she was on the floor. Maybe she was. She survived. But the point is, they blew up an entire floor of a hotel in London. I mean, that's an atrocity. What if England had gone to war and flattened Northern Ireland? Completely.
Well, they
flattened it.
did continue their occupation, and it
They
continues to
did,
this
and it was
day.
violent, but it was not on this scale. And so
No,
the
this
point is,
scale, I think this scale, there's a couple of factors coming into it. First of all, the Netanyahu government, the last 10 years, the ascent of religious parties, the dehumanization. You talked about the settlements. You and I agree on those. And I thought, and I've talked to Israeli friends and said, you got to stop doing that. They haven't listened to Scott, weirdly.
and the Israeli government's all about it.
Yes, they are. Well, and you and I both know, you can hear, have heard numerous interviews of the settlers there, the dehumanization of
They're maniacs. They're racist.
Well, you know what it reminds me a little bit of is Americans moving west and taking over Native American lands. And well, we're just taking it from those horrible, dirty, rotten savages.
Yeah.
And the language that the settlers used in describing Palestinians is not dissimilar. So, I mean, I guess your question is, how can I continue to support them? I support them because that is
my question.
There are imperfect systems, and
I guess what would it take, Scott? I mean, like, let's just say, Israel is Israel is a nuclear power. What if they drop? I mean, that has been suggested by at least one Israeli cabinet official, that an atomic bomb should be dropped on Gaza. I mean, I don't know if he was just, that's just hot rhetoric, although intemperate rhetoric, which frankly is unworthy of someone in his position.
Yes.
But let's just say that Israel did that. would you still continue to support Israel and say, well, on October 7th?
No, I would say, I'd say that's a bridge too far. Obviously, that's escalating to a point that, what happens next? Iran may or may not have the bomb. There is a Muslim bomb in Pakistan. Where does that end up?
But let's just say it had no dangerous repercussions for the region, which is, of course, impossible to imagine. But I mean, just on moral grounds, just like on moral grounds, like what would it? What's the line in the sand for you? I mean, there has to be a line in the sand, right?
Of course, and I think it's one of those. I had not thought of it, quite frankly, that deeply. Like if they dropped a bomb on what's left of Gaza,
and then
that crosses a line, obviously.
So then, like if they kill 50,000, if they kill 100,000, if they kill 200,000, is there a line?
Yeah, I think there is. I think they've come very precariously close to crossing it. Obviously, I mean, I think any rational human being will say yes, they've come close to crossing it. Even supporters of Israel like myself. I'd like to know, and they have not been good at articulating what the end game is. I don't know what it is. What are they trying to accomplish here? I mean, if it's the Ted Rall, they want to flatten it and turn it into, Gaza sandals, then that's wrong, because these people have and had a right to exist and live where they lived. What on the moral, I hate war. Okay, I'm going to start there and just say war is dumb. War is destructive. War always ends up where you should have been at the first place. And that's what's probably going to happen here. So am I happy? Am I proud of Israel? No, at this stage, I'm not. But by turns, I understand their reaction. Overreaction though it is. And I think we can agree on that.
But when would you stop understanding their reaction?
If they've already announced today that they're bringing back, I think 10 or 20,000 troops, mostly because they need people to work in Israel.
That still leaves a lot of troops in the field.
Right.
Not to mention the airplanes are still flying. They're still dropping bombs.
If this continues,
and people and even if they stopped bombing right now, people would keep dying because they're starving to death, even though the IDF says they're not.
Well, it's on both sides. It's hard to decide what's true and what's not.
I mean, that's true. I mean, there's hundreds of foreign reporters on the ground. I mean, it's not like from all over the world. So
right.
So it's not like, I mean, it is happening. There's no question.
And they're getting killed too, by the way. I mean, the number of journalists, I think it's up to over 40, near 50.
Oh, we're over 100 now. And this is by far the highest casualty rate in a conflict ever. Having previously been in a record-setting journalistic clusterfuck in 2001, it's kind of naive to be like, well, in our little convoy of 45, we only lost 12. At that time, that was a record for 12 to be lost in a single combat incident, but that is no longer true.
I've had friends. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
But I mean, so I guess the thing is, Scott, I mean, when you say, well, what's the goal? I mean, what's the goal? Or what's the end game? I mean, I gotta say, like, according to all reports, Gaza is no longer inhabitable. That is a fait accompli, right? That's just the facts on the ground. And like, if some reason Netanyahu was taken over by the ghost of Yasser Arafat and woke up tomorrow morning and said, I'm so sorry. I can't believe we did that. Let's put it all back. And sorry, you guys get it, our bad. October 7th, our fault. We're sorry. It's too late, right? I mean, there's no way the people of Gaza can go home. They don't have homes anymore.
There's no homes to go back to.
You're right. So therefore, they are not going to live there anymore. That's a fact. So the only question is where, which is not Gaza, are the people of Gaza going to live? Are they going to live in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, as has been suggested by some Israeli officials? Are they going to be in the Sinai, which seems almost certain, in a giant tent city for 2 million people? Or are they going to be in Israel proper, waiting, like invited in? And I don't see that happening either, for a variety of reasons. Yeah, I think even if the Israeli public, again, was taken over by the spirit of Yasser Arafat tomorrow, that they wouldn't be able to do it, because it's a country of fewer than 10 million people. You're talking about, absorbing 2 million. Imagine, like, the United States taking in 20% of its population. We can't accept 60 million people like tomorrow, okay? Even though we're a big, rich country, there's no way. So, and Israel's not like really a rich country. And so
they're pretty rich.
I mean, it's for there, but the point is they have a very high aging population. They have a lot of ultra-Orthodox people who don't contribute to the economy. They just study the Torah. It's an old country, a lot of aging people. When you go there, it's very striking. You kind of feel like you're in like a retirement community in Florida. There's not a lot of young people. So I guess the point is, that's the facts on the ground. I mean, that's it. Yeah. So Scott, here's a tough question number 2.
Okay.
They have effectively ethnically cleansed Gaza. It's already done. I mean, the population hasn't been moved and hasn't all been done, but it's done. There's no putting the genie back in the bottle. So do you still support Israel, even though they ethnically cleansed 2.3 million people, half of the entire Palestinian population of pre 1948 Palestine, ethnically cleansed? I mean, does the murder of 1,200 people justify that?
Well, I'm going to totally disagree with your assessment that this was ethnically cleansed.
Well, what else is it?
They're not. Well, they were invaded a place that invaded them. Would be
but it's ethnically cleansed if the people of Gaza are kicked out of Gaza. That is ethnic cleansing.
They're not kicked out of Gaza. There's still a lot of them in the south of Gaza.
We'll have this conversation in a few months. They will be. I mean, there's no question. They have to.
No, I think what's going to happen, because you're all, and with the parts that you're ignoring are things like the announcement that Israel is already in talks to partnering with Egypt, with Jordan, possibly Saudi Arabia, possibly the Emiratis, at rebuilding Gaza. Now, what does that mean, and what does that look like?
They're not going to wait and see. Dime from those people. They're not going to pay for that.
Oh, they will, because they don't want the Palestinians there. I mean,
they're also not going to.
You know the history of the Palestinians in that region. They show up in Jordan. Jordan, after 10 years, goes, "Oh fuck no, kick them out." Well, they show up in Lebanon after 10 years. Lebanon goes, "Fuck that." You're
talking about. You're conflating two things, Scott. You're conflating the who takes the refugees with who rebuilds Gaza. I don't think that, like, the Arab states are going to rebuild Gaza at all. Like, why should they? What do they get out of it? What would be the advantage to them? Why would they pay? They're not going to pay. And even if you say, like, I don't know, God
what's decides, the advantage?
let's say Jeff Bezos decides he wants to pay, right? The point is, like, Santa Claus decides to pay. Fine. It's going to take 5 or 10 years. There are tens of thousands of unexploded bombs all over Gaza. I've seen them do this in Afghanistan. Man, it is one of those fuckers takes like months to disarm and like handle. It's a big fucking project. So it takes years. There's no fucking way you couldn't there's no way you could rebuild Gaza in under 10 years if it was ass-kickingly efficient and quick. Maybe 10 years. Maybe.
Yeah, I don't know that.
And where do the people go in the meantime?
Okay, well, firstly, I think you can build it faster than that, but that's we can get a contract.
Let's just say 5. Okay, where do the people go in 5 years? For 5
Well, you just mentioned it. I think the south of Gaza bleeding into the Sinai, and that's where. But Egypt doesn't want them there because they've been in Egypt once before, and Egypt.
And the Israelis will never let them back in ever.
Well, if they're rebuilding, it depends on what the rebuilding is and what shape that takes and what political will there is. The Netanyahu government's not going to survive this.
No, that's true. No Israeli government is going to allow the Gazans to return to Gaza. It's just like,
I disagree.
You really think they will?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just say for the sake of argument that
Okay.
as has happened in the past sometimes, Scott, where I'm like, I was right. So let's just say that like that happens and like I was right. Would that be if the gates are opened to Gaza, I mean to the Sinai, and then the gates are shut behind them, and the Gazans are your invitation to come home has been revoked. You are no longer welcome. You know, like get out.
Question that they never return.
Exactly. So let's just say that's the case. Is that a bridge too far for you? Is Israel still worth supporting at that point?
I'd have to watch that story unfold. I can't really commit to that right now because I don't know. I'd have to see how that unfolds. I understand not wanting a group of people that lobs missiles into your country every day to not allow them to come back. I get that.
I get it too. I get it.
That would be annoying. Now here, before I do want to touch on this subject, and that's the expansion of hostilities. The thing we're not talking about is what's happening up on the border with Lebanon, the attacks on Hezbollah. And in addition, I am unaware of, and it sounds like you would know better than I, are there any military actions by Israel against the West Bank currently?
So no, what's really happening there is terrorist attacks by Israeli settlers against Palestinian inhabitants of the West Bank. So, and the IDF is standing by and laughing and sort of facilitating them and allowing them to happen. So they're kind of like running interference for the settlers, watching out for them, covering up for them, but they're not active. And they have been shooting there have been some unprovoked shootings of Palestinians who literally have just been standing around by the IDF, just like they weren't doing anything, just hanging out. They were just shot randomly. So the IDF, but it hasn't been like, thousands and thousands like in Gaza. The nature there has been that the settlers have been running wild, and they view this as their big opportunity to finish the job and get rid of the Palestinians there. They've been murdering local Palestinians by the hundreds, driving them off their land, cutting down their olive trees, building fences to separate them from their farms, beating them up mercilessly. So there's been a lot of that.
I have to read up on that because I that sounds like something we'd be hearing about, and we're not.
Well, you will if you read like the BBC or like the Guardian.
I do, and Al Jazeera.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
So okay, well, you didn't convince me. I didn't convince you.
And the New York Times. The New York Times has had very good coverage about this, actually. Okay, and the Washington Post.
Check it out. I will check it out. But bringing in, you mentioned Iran at the top of this segment. I didn't used to hate Iran. I kind of hate it now. The fact that they took one of our ships, you know how that's going to play out. I mean, but
it seems like such a minor thing, like ethnic cleansing of 2 million people. Like, to see how that goes. But one ship?
Oh, I didn't
with
say
6
that.
guys on it?
I disagreed that it was ethnic cleansing. That's where we disagree on definitions. But Iran, they're actively their presence in Iraq, and their presence in parts of Afghanistan, especially the southern part. They're actively helping people, at the very least, kill Americans. That's a problem.
But Iran's not very active. Is not active in Afghanistan. That's not really true.
They were for years in the southern part. Yeah, they were.
No, that's not.
Well, I can show you my cartoon that disagrees because I drew about it.
Because Iran and the Taliban are enemies. Shia versus Sunni.
Right. So Iran, especially after our invasion, this comes stumbling in and says, "Hey, we like this place. I don't know why, but they do." No, they were.
We're going to go into Western Afghanistan because that's where the border is. But I know I've walked across.
No, I'm not arguing with you on that. I'm not arguing with you on that. I'm just trying to picture it in my head.
Yeah. Like if you think about like Herat is northwestern Afghanistan, big city there, and that you cross the border in Iran, and you're about 6 hours away from Mashhad in northeastern Iran, which is like a holy city. But anyway, so why are you so pissed off at the Iranians?
I'm just
or at the government of Iran. I imagine.
Yes, I would say that, and the mullahs there, and Gom.
who are very, by the way, extremely unpopular. This is, the American media is full of shit usually when it comes to anything international. But when it comes to like how they
No.
portray the government of Iran as being uncomfortable, being unpopular, maybe uncomfortable, I have found that to be true. I think maybe 10 to 15% of the population is supportive of the government. Everyone else hates their guts.
Yeah, I mean, you and I have totally agreement with this because we both lived in LA, or I lived in LA, you worked there, and it's a large Persian population, and they were about as American as anyone you could think of on the planet, other than
temperamentally,
Americans.
they're very similar to us.
Yeah, they really were. And so, just the revolution always kind of I thought it would be short-lived.
Well, the revolution was, I hate to say it, I think that Iran would have moderated enormously if the US had left it the fuck alone. Don't forget, like right after the revolution, we supported Iraq's invasion of Iran and the Iran-Iraq War from 1980 to 1986. That was brutal. So we're like using our bud Saddam Hussein to go after the Iranians. We should have left them the fuck alone. We didn't understand anything. Like now we know that Ayatollah Khomeini, who we thought of as this fierce dude with this awesome, crazy, terrifying beard and wild eyes, he was a moderate. He was pushing for moderation inside the regime, and he was constantly being undercut by American actions. I do think you catch a lot more bees with honey than with vinegar, and the U.S.
certainly.
We do not do that, and like the sanctions aren't helping. The sanctions, like when you go to Cuba, that you just realize like the government's like ish popular, but man, the sanctions props them up. It's like same thing in Russia. Everyone in Russia thinks that the sanctions are because we hate the Russian people. That's what the Cubans think. They think the America hates the Cuban people and wants them to starve and die. That's what the Iranians think about. They're like, why do the Americans try to kill us? So like sanctions are a disaster. They don't work at all. They're so counterproductive.
I'm trying to think of one instance where it's done what we had hoped they would do.
Never.
Oh, there was an upstart little Asian country about 70 years ago, and we decided to have very heavy sanctions and not allow them to get gasoline and oil. And
oh, right. Oh, that worked great.
I remember. Yeah, Japan, and they handled it well.
They were chill.
Yeah. They were like, okay,
I think the best argument for sanctions is probably apartheid era South Africa, but most historians think that it didn't really make any. It was probably a wash there. The people of South Africa were able to understand why we were doing it, but so they didn't really hate us for it. But it doesn't seem to have really moved the needle.
You don't think it was Little Steven's Ain't Gonna Play Sun City that did it?
Probably, maybe not. Maybe it was, maybe not.
Because when rock and roll stars,
I think honestly, the fear of just like being the white minority, of knowing that you're 15% of the population and you're trying to control these people who fucking hate you because you've been oppressing them for forever. I think they got to a point where they were just like, we're tired of being scared all the time. Like,
I think it was unsustainable. It's just unsustainable.
Well, that's Israel. Israel is unsustainable.
Well, and I've said this before. Why don't we end on this? That you can't be a democracy and be an occupier. They're mutually exclusive. You cannot be both.
Right. Or, but like, hey, I'm going to say also, I think the idea of, like how the US never resolved at its founding, the slavery issue. They just kicked the can down the road, right? Like in 1789. And Israel never settled the question of, is it a European style modern nation state, secular state, or is it a medieval style religious state? And and they never resolved it, and they kicked it down the road. What we're seeing now is a result of that failure to decide that. I think I'm going to say I think the two-state solution is dead on both sides. The Israelis clearly don't want one, And now the Palestinians don't want one either. I think they both kind of want the whole thing to themselves. And the Solomonic decision is you guys have to share. You have to live together in one country, one man, one vote. Sorry, Jews, if you're upset that like the Arabs are breeding faster than you and you're going to lose control of your population, of your country, then you should better start boning and popping out more kids. It's like you get to it, because it's like
President Ted says, "Start boning, Israel."
Well, that's it. Hey, it's a good campaign pledge. Like this is your president ordering you to have more unprotected sex. I mean, but I do think that's what we're gonna. I don't know, Scott. I'm going to hold your feet to the fire on this thing, because I do think it's you're a moral person, and I think what you're suffering from is cognitive dissonance. You're sort of like, you want to. I think it's like being a German in the 30s, and you love your country and its culture, but you hate what its government is doing, and it's hard to reconcile those two things. And I think it's okay to be to say you support the people of Israel and say that the government is disgusting and should be shunned. And I think that's kind of like, I think that's the sweet spot. I mean, I think that like Netanyahu's government is far right, extremist, insane.
Yes. Well, and like the religious, you talk about the secularism versus the religious state. He's allowed the religious parties to have far too much power for 10 years. And that puts a lie to a secular state, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's not yeah. And, look, Netanyahu has repeatedly bragged about like how he threw like a stick through the spokes of the wheel of a two-state solution, that he'd never wanted that. And he's like, so he's been very clear about it. And don't forget, he gave, it's so funny. The Israelis are like finding these suitcases of euros and dollars that were, in lavish homes that were owned by Hamas like officials. It's like, and they're like, look at these corrupt Hamas officials with their suitcases full of cash. And I'm like, who delivered that cash, right? That was Netanyahu sent them that cash. Like they got it from the Israelis. You can look it up. I mean, Israel propped up Hamas from day one, because Netanyahu's policy was divide and conquer. Like if Fatah, which was running the Palestinian Authority in both the West Bank and Gaza, had a unified deal, it would they might be able to negotiate effectively towards a Palestinian state. So he's like, we don't want to do that. We want to keep the Palestinians fighting amongst each other. So just like the U.S. when we funded the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, they ended up financing like a snake that ended up biting them.
Okay.
You're like, shut up, Ted. All right. I'm used to that. I know that look. All right, that's fine. I go a little too far. I get upset.
No, not at all.
Genocide, schmenocide.
This is the kind of discussion we have to have. And I mean, frankly,
True.
We got a little heated, but nothing. I mean, this is like,
no, it's
you
true.
and I, with another couple hours, we'd probably find some kind of common ground. And
oh no, that's true. I mean, look, I think, and I think there's, I mean, look, I like Israel. I liked the people. I like the place. I think the government is really problematic. I mean, hell, I like the United States. I like the people. I like the place. The government problematic.
No, I'm with you. No, I hear you.
So that's kind of how I think it's, and I think that's the key. I think it's like almost wrong journalistically when they say like, when they personalize the government. So, like when they say like, Uganda complained about Tanzania or whatever. And it's kind of like, well, no, Uganda didn't do anything. Like the prime minister of Uganda did something, or the Congress of Uganda said something or voted on something, but the people didn't say anything. Nobody asked their opinion. And I think it's sort of like, or when they say the capital, right? Like Washington issued a directive. I mean, I know what they mean, but that shorthand, it like gets into our brains and we start to think that it's real. It's like linguistics, right? Like we really think, my country, love it or leave it. Well, my country for sure I love, but I don't love my government at all. And like, but we're not allowed to have that separation, but we should, because they're not the
Well, of
same thing.
course. Well, it's nuanced too, and we can't have that.
It'll only cause trouble. All right.
Just confuses people.
All right. Now that we've not solved the Middle Eastern crisis, but at least unlike Jared Kushner, we weren't paid to do that. So, fuck it.
I wonder if someone handed me a check for $1 billion, yeah, I could probably come to some kind of like, here's what we ought to do.
You think?
$1 billion? Yes. Yes, I can do it. I'd do it for $1 million.
I think I could do it for $20. I mean, I think the problem is, I got to say, a little overtime here. Personally,
Okay.
I would, if I were the president, this is a Scott question. You always ask me this question. Okay, so I'll ask you, if you're President Stantis, would you do what President Rall would do? President Rall would call Prime Minister Netanyahu and say, Bibi, this you've got to bring this in for a soft landing. You've got to stop. You got to like ramp down the fighting, and you've got to let people out. You can't trap them in there anymore, and you got to let in all the aid. You got to stop. You just got to stop. And if you don't, and you've got to say officially, have the Knesset vote on this, that you favor Palestinian sovereignty, and we want to see you make serious motions towards that within the next year or two. And we'll set a deadline, 5 years, there's a sovereign Palestinian state. Like, if you agree to this, or no more $3.8 billion per year, like, done. We'll still answer your calls, and then if you don't do that, we're going to start to distance ourselves more. We're going to reduce intelligence cooperation and all that stuff. But right now, just stop. And that would, I think someone has to tell them. And we have that power. We have the power of the purse.
Yeah, I think, well, obviously that would put a chill into the government. I'm insisting on a 2-state right now. I think the timing is terrible, but I do believe that, yeah, you have the power to say, okay, you're bringing it in for a soft landing. You made your point.
Right. You're done now.
Yeah. I think that'd be that's a reasonable approach and a reasonable thing to request.
But right now, that would be considered in the present state in the U.S. I don't think you would find like 50 congressmen who would be willing to support that position.
No, they can't. I mean, the Israel lobby is, as we all know, very, 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 very strong, very pervasive, has been around for a very long time. So yeah, but that's but that's not really a question for the Congress, for the House or the Senate. It's the House for the administration, and they're the ones who control the purse strings on international spending, and so they're the ones who could say, like you suggest, knock it off, or we're cutting you off. You do that with your kids.
Yeah, that's true. Like, it's kind of like, look, if you want to be a bonehead, but I'm not paying for it. Right. Like, little Hunter, I'm not, buy your own crack.
Oh my God. Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's
all right. So with that, we're going to take a little break and come right back and talk about this crazy Fonnie Willis story.
She's nutty, kooky, crazy. Or we can record another one.
Okay. So we kind of fucked up. Well, because
there's no kind of about it.
We fucked up royally. Not quite Israel and Gaza style, but pretty bad. So basically we went over and foolishly, I thought I was being super smart by teasing the 2 other topics we were going to talk about, which were what? I'm not even going to say, because we're not going to talk about them now. But
right, they don't matter. If we don't talk about them on this podcast, they don't exist.
Which were interesting and might be in the future, in which case, if they are, we will talk about them later. So anyway, we're not going to, because Scott, you're out of time and you have stuff to do.
I'm
cartoon
sorry.
To draw. So we got to let you go and draw, because we are cartoonists first, and the show must go on. So
the ink must go on the page, which I don't use either.
So this will be just this one Israel thing today, but that's okay. It was a good conversation. I enjoyed it. So Scott, where can we find all things Scott?
Go to chicagotribune.com/OT opinion. You can see a gallery of the work I do for them. You can now go to the Dallas Morning News at dallasnews.com. I'm drawing for them as well. You can go to gocomics.com and go to Prickly City, where my political comic strip. And you can hear Ted and I on the excellent, the spectacular, the amazing Center Clip mini podcast, 30 seconds, no longer than 5 minutes. Ted and I are both on it with some other friends of ours, and it's pretty, I think it's pretty great. I love it. Ted, where can we see things, Ted?
I like it too. So yeah, Scott, so you can find me at rall.com, RALL.com, whowhatwhy.org, and Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 12 noon Eastern on Sputnik Radio, which you can find on Rumble. And you don't have to listen to it live. They have the old ones too. So anyway.
Can I jump in real quick and
Please.
say that honest to goodness, and I have no reason to be nice to Ted after he was so mean to me during that whole segment.
So mean.
It's so mean, but
That's
honest to goodness, I now it's a habit of mine. You and Angie, I turn you guys on through Rumble, and I just use it as radio, and I listen to it in the morning, and it's a spectacularly good show, by the way, folks. So if you haven't listened to it, do yourselves a favor. Seriously, it's really, really good. It's listenable. You're going to hear stuff you don't hear anywhere else. It's not an echo chamber. It's not a scream fest. It's not, well, liberals want to eat your babies kind of bullshittery. It's really, really, really good. So do yourselves a favor.
Thank you, Scott. Much appreciated. All right. So with that, Scott, go draw a cartoon and be fruitful and draw. Don't multiply.
I'll try not to invade anything while I'm doing it.
No, try to avoid that. All right. Thanks, Scott. I enjoyed it. And
Same here.
We'll talk soon offline. Bye, everyone.
Bye.